Hello, this is Grandmaster Maxim Belugi with ChessLessons.com. Let me show you an interesting opening, the Alekhine's defense, called after the great world champion Alexander Alekhine, who actually has not played it that much in his practice, but he got his name attached to the first move in chess. After the move e4, black plays knight f6, and this by itself is already the Alekhine's defense. Now, we have to realize that this is a very hyper-modern idea. Black is urging white to keep pushing at black's knight, but at the same time he's saying, but I will already have developed my knight. So after the move e4, knight f6, of course e5 is the most conventional move, but let me show you what can happen if white, for example, plays knight c3. Now, besides black transposing into a number of different openings, he can play the typical Alekhine defense system, starting with the move d5. Now, if white pushes through now with e5, black has this really funny way of meeting it with the move d4. We have all these pieces on the long diagonal. White takes the knight on f6, black takes the knight on c3. If white takes the pawn on e7 now, black will capture back with check, so white will not be able to win a pawn. So he takes the pawn on g7. Black takes on d2, and now the best move is for white to actually go into the ending with queen takes d2. After queen takes queen, check, bishop takes d2, bishop takes g7, white castles queenside, and we get a very interesting position. Black plays some logical move like knight c6, developing his pieces, and we get a very interesting position. On the face of it, white is a little bit better because black has some weaknesses in the pawn structure, namely the pawn on h7 is weaker than the counterparts that white has. But white has something, black has something that white does not, which is a pawn in the center. So black's central pawns are actually balancing out the weaknesses that he has, and the position is actually quite equal. If you study it, you'll see that as black develops his pieces, let's say if white plays bishop b7, bishop d7, knight f3, black castles queenside, then utilizes his rooks, actually black's position is fine. So for this reason, knight c3 has come out of fashion, and white has tried to prove some advantage by playing e5. Let's take a look at that and figure out if this is in fact worth our while to play the Alekhine's defense. So after the moves e4, knight f6, e5, black plays knight d5, continuing to move the pieces into the center. White plays d4, and immediately black has to attack the center, otherwise he risks being overrun by white's pawns. So he plays d4. Now the main line for white is to play knight f3 to start developing his pieces. Although there is a very interesting variation starting with c4, which used to be favored by David Bronstein, who was the number 2 player in the world at one time, knight b6 and then f4, just running with the pawns. But actually, this way of playing is quite dangerous for white, as black can immediately attack the center by going pawn takes pawn, knight c6, knight f3, bishop g4. And now, after bishop e3, black can play e6, and you can see the pawns are not moving forward anymore. While black has a very steady position, he has managed to stop white's pawns from moving further. So, because of that, most attempts to try to prove an advantage for white have been focused on the so-called modern variation, which starts with the move knight f3. Black plays bishop g4. Now white kicks the knight with c4, knight b6, and plays bishop e2. Now black can play e6. White takes the pawn on d6, black takes back, and white plays knight c3. Notice then that in all of these variations, black could not win the pawn on c4 because after bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, not only is knight c4 bad because white can take the pawn on b7, but white can also check on a4 with a double attack on the knight and the king. So the pawn on b6, on c4 is really very well protected. But black plays, for example, knight c6, and has a reasonable position. For example, if white plays b3, black can play d5, attacking the center pawns, and after c5, move the knight back to d7. And then the bishop will try to come here and onto f6 and attack the pawn on d4. And it's now clear that white has an advantage. Although, of course, the position is extremely rich in play and can be recommended for everyone who is of tactical nature. For example, Lev Albert, who is a great tactician, used to win the US championships back in the day when I was playing the Alekhine defense exclusively against 1e4. So I suggest you look at his games, because he has a lot of great ideas playing on the black side of the Alekhines. Thank you very much. This was Maxim Bludny.